Good day. We're looking here at the ingredients we're going to put in our hen pie. We have here 1 chicken breast. That's about a pound of meat, and we're going to chop that up. We got some bacon strips, and that's going to be about a half a cup of meat chopped up. We got 2 egg yolks, and there's our spices, our saffron, cumin seed, black pepper, and of course some salt. One of the first things we're going to do in this recipe is get our meat prepared for the filling. As I said before, this is a chicken breast. This is a modern chicken breast, so this is a lot larger than a medieval chicken breast would have been. And likely your medieval cook probably would have had just whatever chicken meat he had on hand. This is about a pound of meat. We're going to cut it up in sort of smallish chunks. I found that I like chicken breast in this recipe because I found that thigh meat was a little too greasy for it, a little too fatty. And I've also tried it with ground chicken, which gives me no structure to my pie. So I've kept with a chicken breast. The other piece of meat that's going in this is some nice bacon. This is going to be chopped up. The recipe is actually very specific that the bacon should be chopped up in the size of peas. So we're going to chop that fairly small. This is just modern sliced bacon that you buy at the grocery store. Your medieval cook probably would have had slab bacon and chopped it up from there. So we're going to chop up the meat and come back. Okay, here's your chicken and your bacon all chopped up. Now you got to remember once you've been dealing with raw chicken, so you need to wash your hands good when you get done. But we're going to set that aside and deal with our spices for now. The first thing we're going to look at is the saffron. Now, saffron is still today one of the most expensive spices out there because it has to be all hand harvested. It's the stamens that grow in a fall blooming crocus, and each flower has 3, maybe 4 stamens. They all have to be hand picked. No mechanization there, so that really brings the cost up. This saffron was probably grown in Spain, and that's where most of our saffron comes from today. In the Middle Ages, it might have been grown in Spain or Italy or in Persia. So we just need a little pinch here. And what we're going to do is a little pinch of spice, saffron. I'm going to crush it up, and we're going to put it in with the eggs. One of the things you want to do with saffron when you're dealing with saffron is what they call blooming your saffron. So you want to combine that with your liquid ingredients and let it sit a little bit while you're getting the rest of the stuff together. So we're going to set that aside, and we'll talk a little bit more about our other spices. Now, the original recipe just says pepper and cumin, and you might want to have that whole, but I like mine ground up, so we're going to have to do that. So this is a mortar and pestle. This is a mortar and pestle, and it's a tool you can use even today. It's used no food processors in the Middle Ages, so this is one of your food processing items. And with a mortar and pestle, you just run your pestle right down there. I don't know if you can hear it grinding up a little bit. And the motion is around and around rather than up and down. If you do a lot of up and down, you end up breaking your mortar, so that's no good. Now we get that all ground up. So that smells good. That's all ground up. If you don't want to grind yours from whole spice, or if you like to have whole spice, you can certainly do it that way. Have to be a little cut there. Now we have some black peppercorns. Peppercorns can be a little tricky when you put them in a mortar because they tend to jump out because they're all round. But I like to tap them a little bit. I know I said don't go up and down in your mortar, but I like to just crack them a little bit before we get going. Here we are back with our raw meat. We're going to put a little salt in there, about half a teaspoon. We have a teaspoon of our ground black pepper there. Got about a teaspoon of our ground cumin seed. And here's our egg yolks with our saffron in it. You see the saffron starting to make that a little oranger. We're going to scrape that all into there. little bigger spoon for that because we'll stir it up with that. Now, if you have some free-range eggs, that'll make this dish very yellow filling. So that's preferable, but you can certainly do it with any eggs you get at the supermarket. Look out for those clumps of spices there. Just going to get it all mixed up well. Now, if you like a little more spice in it, you can certainly put more pepper or more cumin or take things out. If you haven't got saffron, you can certainly exclude that. But I like all these things. So there's our filling. And our next step is get the pastry ready. I've cheated a little bit today. I've just used a commercial pastry, which works just perfectly fine for this project. But you could use any pastry recipe you like. For a hand pie, what you want is a sturdy pastry that's going to stand up to being handled. Puff pastry is probably not a good choice, but you could certainly do them. I have for years used my little tart pan as a cutter. This little tart is about 4.5 inches across. So I've made pies that are going to be folded over about 4 inches wide and 2 inches long. So we'll pull this extra out. I do like when I use a commercial pastry to roll it out a little thinner than the way it comes in the package. I just like it a little thinner. But you can certainly done it any sort of thickness you like. Now, one of the things we're going to need to do is we're going to need to have a little something around the edge to seal up this pastry. I generally just use some water, but if you can certainly use some beaten egg yolk or some beaten egg, and that works really well. And then you can use the rest of it for an egg glaze in the oven. Well, I just run my fingers around the edge with a little water. Get that up so you can see that. Then we take a little spoonful of our filling here. Not too much. This is the size I generally make these. So it's a good size to have like 2 for a lunch. But I've made them bigger, and I've also made them a little smaller to be like an appetizer size, and you can certainly do them either way you like. And we're just going to press that edge together. Now, if you're very clever, you can make a nice rolled edge there, or you can just take a fork and press it down. Just make sure it's all sealed up, and we'll put those on our cookie sheet, our pastry board, and do that. We'll do one more. It's easy to get a little too much filling in them, and then they're difficult to get closed up properly. If this is enough filling, we could probably do 10 or so of these small size. A little bigger size, you can put a little more filling in a bigger one. A little less if it's smaller. If you're going to make them small, I'd probably chop up your meat a little finer than I did today. But we're just going to pinch those edges together. Well, here we are, our pies are all put together. Now at this point, you can do one of two things. You can take these and put them directly in the freezer and let them freeze for about 20 minutes, and then put them in a bag and bake them later. Or we can move on to baking them. Now, at this point, you could just bake them the way they are, but they're going to look a lot nicer if we put a little egg wash on them. If you're not familiar with egg wash, that's a beaten egg with just a little bit of water in it to thin it out. And it will give us a nice glossy brown coat on these pies. And it also gives us the opportunity to garnish them with a little seed. We could, since this is a cumin pie, put a little cumin seed on it. Or I like to put black onion seed or nigella seed on it. I just like the way it looks. But you could put sesame seed on there. You could put a lot of different things. The added advantage of that is then you can look at those pies, you say, okay, the ones with the cumin seed on it are the cumin chicken pies, and the ones with something else on them are a different kind of pie. So if you have more than one pie in your basket. But we're going to stick these in the oven, and we'll bake them, and we'll come back and show you what they look like when they're all baked. And here's some of our finished pies. We baked them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for about 30 minutes. If you had a larger pie, it might need a little longer. But here we are. They're all done now. We find that you can eat them nice and warm. They're lovely that way, or you can let them come back to room temperature and eat them at room temperature. I find that the cumin flavor gets a little stronger if you let them sit till the next day, which when we're packing for an outing, this is what I usually do, is make them the night before and pack them away in a little cooler. And put a little salad with that, a little carrots or something on the other side, and you have a nice little lunch. Good day, good gentles, and thank you for watching our little video. It's one of our early efforts, so I hope it wasn't too confusing. I'm Rycheza the Polska, known in the modern world as Laura Henson, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about where that recipe came from, and also a little bit about hand pies in general. That recipe came out of a book called Libellus del Arte Culinaria, an early northern cookery book. This is edited and translated by two fine scholars, Randolph Grew and Constance Hyatt, whose name you'll see on many other things about medieval cookery. This is a lovely book, and if you're interested in northern cookery and are just interested in the history of manuscripts and how they look at them, this is a really good book. The first part talks about how they're studying these manuscripts. There's 4 manuscripts in all that are obviously the same cookbook. Some have more recipes, some have a few less, but they have generally the same core recipes in them. And the early part of the book, first part of the book, they compare them linguistically and talk about where they've come from. The earliest one in the set is from about 1300, and it's in Danish. One of the other manuscripts is also in Danish. A third one is in Icelandic, and the other one is in German. They do feel that they all come from a German original, so it wouldn't be out of character to call the recipes in here German or Danish, Northern European at any rate. The second part of the book takes out each of the manuscripts and writes out what's in them with a translation. And at the end they do a composite translation that takes into account the variants in all the different manuscripts and gives you the entire translation. And I'm going to read you the translation, the composite translation of our chicken pie that we did. I call it in my notes chicken cumin pie, but here they just call it a hen pie. You make a pastry shell of dough. Put into it a hen cut up in pieces, with bacon diced the size of peas, pepper, cumin, and egg yolks well beaten with saffron. Cover the top with dough, then take the filled shell and bake it in an oven. This is called hen pie. As you can see, that's a little different than what we did in our demonstration. They're calling for a whole hen cut up into pieces. Now, whether that was with the skin off or the skin on, maybe it was partially cooked before it was put in the pie, maybe it was put in raw. It really doesn't say in this recipe, so that gives you room to experiment with that stuff. Now you'll notice it also doesn't say how big that pie is or how much. It takes a whole hen, so it's probably a good size pie, but they're not specific. When you look at other pie recipes in medieval source materials, they very rarely tell you how big the pie is. Sometimes they'll say this filling is enough to make 3 1-foot size pies. Other times they're obviously talking about a very small pie, but they're not real specific about what the shapes and sizes of the pies are. If you look at some late period paintings, particularly in the Dutch paintings, you do see some beautiful pies, and some of them are the basic size of a pie we make today. Some of them are a little larger, some of them are very fancy, some of them are little small pies. It's just kind of depended on what you had, where you were, and how much you wanted to make that pie. So there's always a little leeway to make your pie any size you want. We've talked about hand pies, and we've made our chicken pie up as a hand pie. And I do quite a number of medieval recipes this way. because it makes a great little thing to take for a lunch or a snack when you're out eventing, or just, you know, a day trip in the car and you have a little snack there. And you can adapt pretty much any pie recipe in medieval sources into a hand pie. And the great thing about hand pies is you can put anything in them you want. So if you're going to an event and you want to put manwich in your hand pies, nobody's gonna know what's in your hand pie but you. You can put ham and cheese in it, you can put pepperoni pizza and Parmesan, you can put mushrooms, you can put spinach, you can do anything you want in that hand pie, and it's a great way to make your lunch or your snacks look more medieval without necessarily becoming an expert in medieval cookery. So I'd encourage you all to try your hand at hand pies, to be a little cute, and give it a try. It makes a great snack. It makes something you can cook at home and have on hand as snacks for kids or for husbands or yourself. You can do anything you want to. Please take the time to experiment and have fun. Thank you.